Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I wanted to do this video on Operation Northwoods because I've been hearing a lot of just nonsense about it, and it's not a long document. Anybody can get it. I'm going to give you a quick history lesson on how it came into the public's hands, and then we're going to go over it. And before we go over it, I'm going to show you how you can go grab it if you want to follow along. Because it is a stunning document. It shows how the military industrial complex would manufacture a situation where they could invade another country. And it's more than just drone aircraft and things that have had in relation to 9/11, but not as far as certain personalities have said. So where did this document even come from? Well, the first time that it was ever published was by this guy right here, James Bamford. If you don't know who James Bamford is, he's the man. James Bamford published it in a book called Body of Secrets. Okay, now you can watch The Body of Secrets, and this is on C-SPAN, but it's also on YouTube. Somebody uploaded it. He's been talking about the surveillance state and showing real documentation for decades. He also confronted Michael Hayden when he was the head of the NSA on the spying and his lying about these programs. So James Bamford, we're giving him big props. If you haven't seen any of his work, this is the dude. These are some of his books. Check out his lectures. Again, big ups to James Bamford, because without him, I don't know that this would even be a popularized document. So let's just jump right into it and get going, because again, this is a 1962 document for a pretext to invade Cuba, and it goes all the way through the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So let's just read every single little bit of this bad boy. And we're gonna break it down, by the way, while we go through it. Let's see. So let's start her off. Memorandum for the Secretary of Defense, subject justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. Oh, we got to justify that, baby. Number one, the Joint Chiefs of Staff have considered the attached memorandum for the Chief of Operations Cuba project, which responds to a request of that office for brief but precise description of pretexts. Pretexts. Now, again, what do we do here? How do we get the public to want to invade, which would provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba? The Joint Chiefs of Staff recommend that the proposed memorandum be forwarded as a preliminary submission suitable for planning purposes. So, hey, we're going to go over all this stuff. Let's see what we can plan out. It is assumed that there will be similar submissions from other agencies and that these inputs will be used as a basis for developing a time-phased plan. Individual projects can then be considered on a case-by-case basis. So what program are we going to have the CIA, the Navy, the Air Force? What's going to take place here? And, let them all propose certain situations, but we want to keep compartmentalization really nice. You understand, folks? Further, it is assumed that a single agency will be given the preliminary responsibility for developing military and paramilitary aspects of the basic plan. So again, they're going to harness everything from other agencies. Then one agency will be at the top, again, compartmentalization, and they'll only know pieces of the plan. You see? And that gets elaborated on later on while we go through the different proposals. It is recommended that this responsibility for both overt and covert military operations be assigned the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All right, let's get to the next page. And by the way, guys, anybody can do a simple Google search of Operation Northwoods PDF, and the memo will come up, and here you go. You can read the entire thing with me. Because again, I want you guys to check it out for yourselves. Don't take my words for it, because I'm sick of people just saying things that are not true. So these are the notes by the notes by the secretaries to the Joint Chiefs of Staff on Northwoods. A report on the above subject is submitted for consideration by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All right. And it is, let me see that, Blount and Hidalgo Joint Secretariat. I probably butchered those names, guys. All right, so we get here, and I honestly cannot read this section. It is in text format. Someone has gotten this through. There are pieces in here, but as you can see, they're kind of military sensitive. JCS 69321. I apologize, but again, I wanted to read the original document. So this is a report of the Department of Defense and Joint Chiefs of Staff representative on the Caribbean Survey Group. So this is a survey group. They got all these different agencies to propose things, and now they're going to go through them. The Chief Operations Cuba Project has requested that he be furnished with the views of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on this matter by the 13th of March, 1962. So here we go. Justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. The problem, as requested by the Chief of Operation, Cuba Project. Oh, the requests are here. Yay. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are to indicate brief but precise description of pretexting that they consider would provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. Facts bearing on the problem. It is recognized that any action which becomes a pretext for U.S. military intervention in Cuba will lead to a political decision which would lead to military action. It's about military action. Cognizance has been taken of a suggested course of action proposed by the U.S. Navy relating to generated instances in the Guantanamo areas. For additional facts, see Enclosure B. Now, I'm not sure that even Enclosure B is disclosed or out there or part of this. It may be later down the line, but no one's saying that this is the full scope of the documentation, though. This is what's available. The suggested, course of action append to the enclosure are based on the premise that the U.S. military intervention will result from a period of heightened U.S.-Cuban tensions, which place the United States in a position of suffering justifiable grievances. Remember, it has to be justified in the public's mind. World opinion and the United Nations Forum should be favorably affected by developing the interventional image of the Cuban government as rash and irresponsible, and as alarming and unpredictable threat to the peace of the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so again, they're doing this, and they are going to try to bamboozle the international community into being able to go into Cuba. While the foregoing premise can be utilized at the present time, it will continue to hold good only as long as there be a reasonable certainty that the U.S. military intervention in Cuba would not directly involve the Soviet Union. Don't want to get them involved. We're still talking about them today, huh? And by the way, these are just footnotes. We're going to just skip over that. There is, as yet, no bilateral mutual support agreement binding the USSR to the defense of Cuba. Cuba has not yet become a member of the Warsaw Pact, nor have the Soviets established Soviet bases in Cuba in the pattern of U.S. bases in Western Europe. Therefore, since time appears to be an important factor, they want to get in there before Khrushchev is able to put permanent bases in there, okay? It's an important factor in resolution of the Cuba problem. All projects are suggested within the time frame of the next few months. So again, they're gearing up in 1962 to try to, in the next few months, provoke the United States to go in. And yes, we know all about the Bay of Pigs, but some of these other programs that we're going to get to, we're about halfway through this document, show you how nefarious our government is. Conclusion, the suggested courses of action append to Enclosure A satisfactorily respond to the statement of the problem. However, these suggestions should be forwarded as a preliminary submission suitable for planning purposes, and together with similar inputs from other agencies, provide a basis for development of a single, integrated, time-phased plan to focus all efforts of the objective of justification for military intervention in Cuba. What's that mean? All hands on deck. Let's get going. We need all resources. Let's take this thing. 8, it is recommended that Enclosure A, together with its attachments, should be forwarded to the Secretary of Defense for approval and transmittal to the Chief of Operations Cuba Project. This paper not be forwarded to the commanders of unified or specified commands. Notice that. This is, all right, this goes to the top, and now we're gonna cut it off. Compartmentalization. We don't even want these people to know that we thought about this. This paper not be forwarded to U.S. officers assigned to NATO activities. Remember we just discussed how they want to sway the international community? This paper not be forwarded to the chairman, U.S. delegation, United States Military Staff Committee. You get the picture, guys? Do we get the picture? So, here we are, back to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, okay? So, number one, the Joint Chiefs of Staff have considered the attached memorandum for the Chief of Operations Cuba project, which responds to the request that the Office for brief but precise description of pretexts, remember these pretexts, which would provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. The Joint Chiefs of Staff recommend that the proposed memorandum be forwarded as a preliminary submission suitable for planning purposes. It is assumed that there will be a similar submission from other agencies, that these inputs will be used as a basis for developing this time-based plan. Individual projects can then be considered on a case-by-case basis. So again, they're talking about this case-by-case basis. We're going to get to those shortly, folks, I promise you. Further, it is assumed that the single agency will be given the primary responsibility for developing military and paramilitary aspects of the basic plan. We read this earlier. It is recommended that the responsibility for both covert and overt operations be assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Again, back to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're the ones handling this. Top of the military food chain. So here we go. Operation Mongoose, by the way, which we're about to get into, is absolutely notorious. Memorandum for the Chief of Operations Cuba project, justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. 1. Reference is made to the memorandum from Chief of Operations Cuba project from General Craig, subject Operation Mongoose, dated the 5th of March 1962, which requested brief but precise description of pretexts which the Joint Chiefs of Staff consider would provide justification for military intervention in Cuba. So much repetition in military stuff, guys. The projects listed in the enclosure hereto are forwarded as preliminary submissions for suitable planning purposes. It is assumed that there will be similar submissions from other agencies, and these inputs will be used as a basis for developing a time-based plan. The individual projects can then be considered on a case-by-case basis. Let's see. This plan, incorporating project selection from the attack suggestions or from other sources, should be developed to focus all efforts on a specific ultimate objective, which would provide adequate justification for U.S. military intervention. Such a plan would enable a logical buildup of incidents. See, the logical buildup. Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes. We got to make this gradual. There has to be several things. We're bringing this in. So now the logical buildup of incidents to be combined with other seemingly unrelated events. Notice that also. They're going to combine this with seemingly unrelated events to camouflage the ultimate objective and create the necessary impression of Cuban rashness and irresponsibility on a large scale directed at other countries as well as the United States. Notice that also. They're always talking about building coalitions, guys. So now, seemingly unrelated events are going to camouflage this ultimate objective to bamboozle the public into U.S. intervention in Cuba. All right? The plan would also properly integrate and time phase the courses of action to be pursued. The desired result from the execution of this plan would be to place the United States in the apparent position of suffering defensible grievances from a rash and irresponsible government of Cuba to develop an international image of a Cuban threat to peace in the Western Hemisphere. 4. Time is an important factor in a resolution of the Cuban problem. Therefore, the plan should be so time-phased that projects would be operable within the next few months. That's another thing I really want to talk about is, although a lot of these things may be on the back burner, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And, I just looked into the comments, and I have someone talking about Venezuela right now. And we know that the United States is gung-ho to find a way to get in there. Problem is that Russia's already in there saying, don't even bother. Don't do it. And, we've done several videos on that, but really this situation mirrors that one in many ways, except for, then again, you do have Tomorrow's news today talking about the threat of Venezuelan refugees coming up through the border and that we have to cut them off on the head. But that's not what this is about. We're going to continue with this document. We're almost here. All right. In as so much as the ultimate objective is overt military intervention. See that? So they want to invade. That's what that overt military intervention, invasion. It is recommended that the primary responsibility for developing military and paramilitary aspects of the plan be both overt and covert military operations and be assigned to who? Again, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They want to keep this to the top and compartmentalize the hell out of it. So here we are. These are the pretext. Are we ready? Are we ready? The courses of action which follow are preliminary submissions suitable only for planning purposes. They are arranged neither chronologically nor in ascending order. Together with similar inputs from other agencies, they are intended to provide a point of departure from the development of a single integrated time-phase plan. Such a plan would permit the evaluation of individual projects within the context of the cumulative. Correlated actions designed to lead inexorably to the objective of adequate justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. Since it would seem desirable to use legitimate provocation as the basis for U.S. military intervention, oh, they want legitimate stuff. Then why are we sitting here using pretext that you're about to make up? Legitimate. In Cuba, a cover and deception plan. Oh boy. To include requisite preliminary actions such as has been deployed in response to Task 33C could be executed as an initial effort to provoke Cuban reactions. Harassment plus deceptive actions to convince the Cubans of imminent invasion would be emphasized. Harassment and deceptive actions. Isn't our government lovely? We're the good guys. Our military posture throughout execution of the plan will allow a rapid change from exercise to intervention if Cuban response justifies. Okay? A series of well-coordinated incidents will be planned to take place in and around Guantanamo to give genuine appearance of being done by hostile Cuban forces. Incidents to establish a credible attack. Again, not in chronological order. Start rumors. Many. Use clandestine radio. So again, they used to infiltrate the radio waves. They used to put disinformation that way, obviously using their agents on the ground. 2, land friendly Cubans in uniforms over the fence to stage an attack on the base. All right? 3, capture Cuban friendly saboteurs inside the base. So again, these are our own people. Okay? Start riots near the main gate. Friendly Cubans. Again, all these people that are doing so are, U.S. operatives or on the U.S. payrolls. All right. Blow up ammunition inside the base. Start fires. Burn aircraft on the base. Sabotage. Lob mortar shells from outside of the base into the base. Some damage to the installation. Capture assault teams approaching from the sea or violently of Guantanamo Bay. Capture militia groups that storm the base. Sabotage ships in the harbor. Large fires. I can't read that. Nephthaline. Sink ships near the harbors. Conduct funerals for mock victims. All right, so let's do that. Let's talk about that. So right here is the government talking about sinking ships, U.S. ships, that don't really have any soldiers on them, and then actually conducting mock funerals. So you got to ask yourself, if they're going to conduct a mock funeral, obviously the people there know that there's no dead person there. So who goes to these things? Intelligence officers? I mean, honestly, if you're going to stage, you got to think about that. This is in the document. So again, there's a lot of people throwing misinformation out there, but that our government proposed conducting mock funerals for ships that were sunk to appear to be victims is pretty interesting stuff. The United States would respond by executing offensive operations to secure water and power supplies, destroying artillery and mortar emplacements which threaten the base. Commence large-scale United States military operations. 3, a Remember the Maine incident could be arranged in several forms. Again, false flag stuff. You understand? Here it is. A Remember the Maine. We need some kind of a mantra to get people to want to go into Cuba. So now we're outside of the mock funerals and the small ships. Now we're going to blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. We could blow up a drone. Think about that, an unmanned vessel. So now we're talking about a large U.S. ship. We're talking about drones. We're talking about the Navy, not just the Air Force. This is why this document's really important to go over, guys. There's so much meat in here. So anywhere in the Cuban waters, we could arrange to cause such incident in the vicinity of Havana or Santiago, as well as spectacular result of the Cuban attack from the air or sea or both. Okay, now we're talking Air Force stuff. The presence of Cuban planes or ships merely investigating the intent of the vessel could be fairly compelling evidence that the ship was taken under attack. Okay, so again, they stage an attack. They hope that actual ships and planes come out there, and then they say, look, they're out here. This is pretty convincing evidence they're the ones that caused it. Who else could have caused it? The nearness of Havana or Santiago would add credibility, especially to the people that might have heard the blast or have seen the fires. The U.S. could follow up with an air-sea rescue operation covered by U.S. fighters to evacuate remaining members of non-existent crew. Casualty lists in the U.S. papers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. Now here again, right here, you don't have the mock funerals, but you do have false names being published in the paper, fictitious soldiers, for a wave of indignation to go into Cuba. This is our government. This isn't so far ago. All right? We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign. Here it is right here. So I've heard people say that they were going to shoot up movie theaters in this document. That is not correct. However, it does appear, it doesn't appear, you're looking at it right now, they did say that they could develop a terror campaign, and there's just a few details in that we're going to read in a moment, in Miami. So we could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area or other Florida cities, and even in Washington. And I assume they mean D.C. to make it more political, obviously. All right? So let's continue. The terror campaign could be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the United States. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. So this is where the nitty-gritty starts to come in. You understand? This is how much they care about human life. Remember, they were going to have mock funerals and simulations and indignations through printed names? Well, now we're like, hey, boatload of Cubans. I guess we could do it real style. No big deal. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, even to the extent of wounding in instances to be widely publicized. So let's bring some refugees in and let's have some woundings. Think about this. Exploding a few plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots, the arrest of Cuban agents, and the release of prepared documents. Prepared documents. Remember, this is pre-Kennedy assassination. And they're talking about using plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots, arresting Cuban agents they already have set up, with the release of what? Prepared documents. They already have the documentation prepared. Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is what we're talking about here, folks. Okay? The release of the prepared documents substantiating Cuban involvement also would be helpful in projecting the idea of an irresponsible government. We've got the documents, folks. 5. A Cuban-based, Castro-supported filibuster could be simulated against a neighboring Caribbean nation, in the vein of the 14th of June invasion of the Dominican Republic. We know that Castro is backing subversive efforts clandestinely against Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and Nicaragua at the present, and possible others. These efforts can be magnified and additional ones contrived for exposure. So let's break that part down. They're saying that they're already kind of embattled with these other nations, so let's turn the heat up with some contrived nonsense, okay, for exposure. For example, Advantage can be taken of the sensitivity of the Dominican Air Force to intrusions within their national airspace. Cuban B-26 or a C-46 type aircraft could make cane-burning raids at night. See what they're saying? They're going to get these, they're imposing that they can get these aircraft. And by the way, thank you, Brian Telford. Very appreciated, brother. And then, again, we've got drones. We'll dress planes up. We're going to just help this along. So they're going to have cane-burning raids at nights. Soviet bloc incendiaries can be found. So again, they're going to get Soviet incendiaries and have them be found. Oh. This could be coupled with Cuban messages to the communist underground in the Dominican Republic and Cuban shipments of arms, which would be found or intercepted on the beach. Again, classic false flag stuff. So we'll make sure that it's Russian military stuff all over the place. And there you go. Now here's where we get into some parallels with 9/11, according to some people. Use a MiG-type aircraft by U.S. pilots could provide additional provocation, harassment of civil air attack on surface, shipping, and destruction of U.S. military drone aircraft by a MiG-type plane would be useful as complementary actions. All right? So again, we may not have the MiG, but we'll dress something up we have like the MiG, and then we'll use that to harass a civil aircraft. Or hey, why don't we just have a military drone? An F-86 properly painted would convince air passengers that they saw a Cuban MiG, especially if the pilot of the transport were to announce such fact. So in other words, your guy, your pilot in your plane dressed up as a Cuban MiG is going to announce it's a Cuban MiG. The primary drawback to this suggestion appears to be the security risk inherent in obtaining or modifying an aircraft. However, reasonable copies of the MiG could be produced from U.S. resources in about 3 months. I don't know if that was time sensitive enough for them, but again, we're there. 7. Hijacking attempts against civil aircraft and surface craft should appear to continue as harassing measures condoned by the government of Cuba. Concurrently, genuine defections of Cuban civil and military air and surface craft should be encouraged. So right there, they're talking about encouraging Cubans to hijack their own aircraft. Oh boy. We've never encouraged terrorism. Hijacking an aircraft, that's not terrorism. 8. It is possible to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a chartered civil airliner en route from the United States to Jamaica, Guatemala, Panama, or Venezuela. So here it is, folks. Civil aircraft. Looks like it's going to get shot down. The destination could be chosen only to cause the fight plan, route to cross Cuba. The passengers could be a group of college students off on a holiday or any grouping of persons with a common interest to support chartering a non-scheduled flight. Okay? So now here's the subsection of that. An aircraft at Eglin or Air Force Base would be painted and numbered as an exact duplicate for a civil registered aircraft belonging to CIA proprietary organization in the Miami area. Guys, think about this. In the 60s, in Miami, they were painting up aircraft and had duplicates for military aircraft to civil aircraft. They could do that, right? If you know about Barry Seal and Barry and the boys and all the things that were going on in Miami into South America and smuggling cocaine, and it all came back to the CIA, they're doing the same exact thing in the same exact place. Okay? At a designated time, the duplicate would be substituted for the actual civil aircraft and would be loaded with the selected passengers, all boarded under carefully prepared aliases. The actual registered aircraft would be converted to a drone. So again, they're going to swap out the drone for the actual aircraft. Everybody who gets on the plane is going to have aliases. Takeoff times of the drone's aircraft and the actual aircraft will be scheduled to allow a rendezvous south of Florida. From the rendezvous point, the passenger-carrying aircraft will descend to a minimum altitude and go directly into an auxiliary field at Eglin Air Force Base, where arrangements will have been made to evacuate the passengers and return the aircraft to its original status. The drone aircraft, meanwhile, will continue to fly on the filed flight plan. When over Cuba, the drone will be transmitting on the international distress frequency a Mayday. Now remember, drone, 1962, the size of a commercial aircraft, going to have the Mayday signal over a pre-planned route by Cuba. Message stating it is under attack by a Cuban MiG aircraft. The Cuban MiG aircraft is yet another military plane that we have disguised. It's the only actual physical person that's involved in this operation at this point. The transmission will be interrupted by the destruction of the aircraft, which will be triggered by a radio signal. So again, the MiG, the painted up MiG, doesn't even fire on the aircraft. It actually gets triggered automatically by a radio signal. In other words, pre-planned explosives. This will allow a 10 AO radio stations in the Western Hemisphere to tell the U.S. what has happened to the aircraft instead of the U.S. trying to sell the incident. You see that? The less they have to sell, the better. The more they think it's a real event, the better. So let's make it as real as possible. And now one could argue, well, at least they weren't going to actually kill the passengers. And I guess we could argue that. But when those passengers or those people were Cuban refugees, it was certainly on the table, wasn't it? In this very document. Well, we'll just blow up a boat with some Cubans. And the terror campaign in Miami with plastic explosives, no American citizen was going to be hurt there. And when we're talking about a terror campaign in Miami, remember they said Florida and possibly Washington with prepared documents. We're heading towards the end here, folks. 9, it is possible to create an incident which will make it appear that communist Cuban MiGs have destroyed a U.S. Air Force aircraft over international waters in an unprovoked attack. So now they're going the military route. A group of Cuban MiGs destroying a U.S. Air Force aircraft. Approximately 4 or 5 F-101 aircraft will be dispatched in trail from Homestead Air Force Base, Florida, to the vicinity of Cuba. Their mission will be to reverse course and simulate faker aircrafts for an air defense exercise. And notice how they're going to be using exercises in this in southern Florida. These aircraft would conduct variations of these flights at frequent intervals. Crews would be briefed to remain at least 12 miles off the Cuban coast. However, they would be required to carry live ammunition in the event that hostile actions were taken by the Cuban MiGs. One such flight, a pre-brief pilot would fly tail end Charlie at considerable interval between aircraft. While near the Cuban island, this pilot would broadcast that he had been jumped by MiGs and was going down. No other calls would be made. The pilot would then fly directly west at extremely low altitude and land at a secure base, an Eglin auxiliary. The aircraft would be met with the proper people, quickly stored and given a new tail number. The pilot who had performed the mission under the alias would resume his proper identity and return to his normal place of business. The pilot and aircraft would then have disappeared. Lots of aliases in this plan, huh? At precisely the same time that the aircraft was presumably shot down, and a submarine or a small surface craft would disperse F-101 parts. So here's another really important thing. So now you have a pilot that's going to dip down, make it look like he's crashing, but instead of an actual crash happening, there'll be another military vessel on the scene, and it would disperse F-101 parts, parachute, etc. at approximately 15 to 20 miles off the Cuban coast and depart. The pilots returning to Homestead would have a true story as far as they knew, so everybody in the exercise that wasn't the one guy who goes down would think it's a real thing. That's how compartmentalization works. Nobody else is in on the plan. You understand? Search ships and aircraft could be dispatched and parts of the aircraft found. All right. Facts bearing on the problem. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have previously stated the U.S. Unilateral military intervention in Cuba can be undertaken in the event that the Cuban regime commits hostile acts against U.S. forces or property which would serve as an incident upon which to base overt intervention. We got to have their approval. We need overt intervention. The need for positive action in this event, that current covert efforts to foster an internal Cuban rebellion are unsuccessful, was indicated by the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the 7th of March of 62. As follows. Determination that the credible internal revolt is impossible of attainment during the next 9 to 10 months will require a decision by the United States to develop a Cuban provocation as a justification for the positive U.S. military action. It is understood the Department of State also is preparing suggested courses. So again, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Department of State, to develop justification. They got to develop it, guys. And there it is. We did it. We did it. We went through the whole document. You know what? Nothing about shooting up movie theaters. Plenty about using mock funerals, killing possible refugees, simulating drone attacks, a lot of stuff that is extremely relevant. Guys, I really appreciate you all for joining me on this very, very long broadcast. I'm going to be doing a similar broadcast soon on JFK where I'm going to reveal to you the most important name in the investigation, and how you too can find out at least partially what documents you should be looking for, and we should be saying, hey, we need this declassified. The original 800-page plus investigation into the Kennedy assassination. Who did it, why it's been covered up, and if we're ever going to see it, because, Trump's now promised it twice. We're going to do that, and I think I'm also going to do the Cheney thing. When I hit 15K, guys, I promise you, as soon as I hit 15K, we're going to do an AMA-style broadcast. If you're not following me on Twitter, please do that as well. Guys, we are Change. That's where my main stuff is. 6 of these videos a week are usually myself and Luke Rudowski. And then we do 3 more a day on the backup channel. So I do that, another 18 videos a week right here on a varying array of subjects. If you are not subscribed to those, please do so. If you're not subscribed here, please hit the subscription button. We do deep dives here. We tell the truth. We bring you real, actual news. We're not fake news. We let you think for yourself. And, again, I'm just out here trying to do the right thing and take the available evidence, share it with you guys. I hope you share it with everybody else. So again, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell for notification. But most importantly, guys, get out there, do your thing, and be the change you want to see in the world.